William Shakespeare, he was a guy who wrote in a language called early modern English. And I make a point to my students about what was really important about that time in world history that made early modern English so important and has lasting effects today. So in the globe, we look at it as a class and see that England is over here. And at the time that Shakespeare was writing, England defeated the Spanish Armada here. Hamlet talks about it, about taking arms against a sea of troubles. So if that had not happened in 1588 or so, I'd be a Spanish teacher, not an English teacher, and we'd be speaking Spanish over here in more of North America than we do currently. Although that is changing, and that's a good thing. More languages, more better. So anyway, England was kind of a backwards island nation. They were good at seafaring and everything, but they spoke what I describe as a Creole, because the French here invaded England in 1066. That's where my last name came from, Jeffery. The Norman French came over here and took over England. And for the next 500 years, more and more French became more and more part of English. English used to sound kind of like German. Old English sounds like wait, gearden, geardegum. That's something like the beginning of Beowulf. Anyway, but as you wanted to get closer and closer to the people in power, you tried to speak more and more French. And so all the words in our English language that sound like French or Spanish came mostly from that process. Anyway, England was feeling its oats after 1588 and became kind of the most powerful nation in the world and began to control more of the Atlantic and more of the New World and the colonies. So with that power and that money, the language, which was a kind of a Creole, it was a mixed language. It had Germanic grammar and it had Romance language vocabulary coming in. And I tell my West Indian students who might speak Haitian Creole or Jamaican Patois, that a Creole deserves equal respect to any other language. I don't think of them as broken languages because English itself is a Creole and it's kind of come to dominate the globe. Anyway, so what was going on in England at the time? They were loving their language and showing off with it. For so long, you had to show off with your language by being more and more French and adding more and more French to kind of get in with the rich people. But now, just showing your education and intelligence, the way you might show off like flashy clothing or something. But back then you showed your money and potential economic power and potential suitability as a mate by showing how smart you were and able to use poetry and rhyme and metaphor and simile and be very quick with your words. So people loved to see that in plays and humor. And what's happening, I think, today in language in the United States and globally in the English-speaking world and the linguistic parts of the world and cultural places that are influenced by this and other things, really is happening for me, in the rap world. And here is, we have this sort of Kendrick Lamar bulletin board here. And I have him up here because this is literary art, and I think you take it to the next level when you're in the literary world. This isn't J.K. Rowling. It's not just a cool story. It's doing things that have deeper meaning, have things to figure out, puzzles and long-standing worth that we'll be coming back to for centuries. And when we read in Shakespeare, we read the joy of the insult and the diss. In the Comedy of Errors, Dromio of Syracuse comes back from the Ephesian townhome where Adriana and Luciana are trying to draw the Syracusans in, and he meets a rather large kitchen worker who says that she is his wife, and he is insulting her up and down. They're the best kind of string of your mama jokes, she's so heavy kind of jokes. And, she is... like when he says that she should be called Sir Reverence. I realized the other day that he is punning on the word circumference. Anyway, at one point he says that she is so greasy that he doesn't know what to do with her except to light her clothing and the tallow in it. He says to light her and run from her by her own fire, and her clothing and the tallow in it would burn a whole Poland winter. That's a heck of a diss, and it's pretty funny. And talking to my students about the art of the diss, I think what what we see has happened in the 20th century in the United States is a long oppressed and sidelined group of people, Black Americans, became more empowered. That process is not satisfactorily completed yet, but that greater empowerment really leads to a pride in culture and language, and the explosion of language and art that we saw through the jazz era and in soul music and R&B and rap is, I think, the same sort of social cultural process that was happening in England in the 1580s, 90s, and early 1600s. And a brand new paradigm of language is being crafted in real time alongside this idea of a love of verbal brilliance and creativity, and being able to speak extemporaneously, like Hamlet said, it is extempore from my mother wit. That is freestyling. And many of the words in here and the moments that we see in Shakespeare's plays are meant to be understood as the characters are actually freestyling. They're coming up with these witticisms and these rhymes and this iambic pentameter in real time. So the beef of 2024 that all my students are talking about and the internet is going on about with Kendrick and Drake and Team Drake and Team Kendrick is pretty interesting, because I think it does relate to a linguistic world that I was introduced to in middle school and high school. But I'm not validating Kendrick by saying, oh, he's cool because he's like Shakespeare. These are equal things. These are literatures that I think stand on their own thing, and they don't need validation. Kendrick Lamar does not need Shakespeare to validate him. And so that is a quick talk about how I think Kendrick and Kendrick Lamar relates to our guy.